Alright guys, I am back with my last Cardfight Vanguard Deer Days video on Nintendo Switch. So this is not going to be a standard deck profile like all my other videos. What this is going to be is just a compilation of a bunch of minor changes I made to several of the decks that I have built in this game, where I had a lot of decks that, got a minor upgrade, or in some cases just an aesthetic change, or maybe just swapping out the over trigger or whatever. And I didn't really think those changes justified making an entire deck profile for that deck for such a minor difference. Plus, I'm already behind enough as it is with getting to Deer Days 2. So I decided to just compile those little small changes to all those decks into one video so we can cover them real fast before moving on to the next game. So we will be starting first with version 2 of my Bavsargra deck. So for this deck, I have removed both copies of Tensha Stead, so he's been removed from the deck entirely. And I also dropped Prethi by 1 and Adhitya by 1 in order to add in 4 copies of Sealed Blaze Dragon Kankshati. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from hand, if you have a Vanguard with Bavsargra and its card name, you can Soul Blast 1 and discard a card from hand to search your deck or drop for up to 1 arms card, reveal it, put into your hand, and if you searched your deck, shuffle your deck. So this is an extremely good card for this deck. This ability does allow you to search out any arms card that you want from your deck or your drop. So the best thing about this card is you can now search out your spear, which is the most important arm card that you couldn't already search. So that is going to be the primary target for this card, to get that spear into your hand to set up your double arm play on turn 3. And then he also has his activate ability that says once per turn, you can counterblast 1 and put in arms from Vanguard Circle into Soul to draw a card, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is an extremely helpful ability as well. It lets you take one of the arms that you already have equipped to your Vanguard and shove it into your Soul, and then you draw to replace it and power up Kankshati by 5k. So with the right setup, this ability will allow you to actually loop 2 copies of your spears to let you get a lot of extra draws every turn. So if you have 1 copy of your spear armed to your Vanguard, and then a second copy of your spear in your drop zone, along with a copy of Samadhi, then what you can actually do is you can use this ability to shove the first copy of your spear into Soul and draw, and then use Samadhi's skill to retire himself and arm the second copy of your spear from your drop to your Vanguard. So that will trigger the spear's ability, which will let you draw again, and it will also trigger Bavsargra's ability to let you revive Samadhi. So then you can Soul Blast out the first copy of your spear for Bavsargra's cost to get it in your drop zone for next turn, and you'll be able to loop this entire combo again every turn until you run out of counterblasts, I guess. So that will let you draw off of this skill and draw off of the spear skill every turn. So that's a +2 to your hand, and it'll still result in your Vanguard being armed with both of your arms. So that is a very nice combo this deck can pull off now to continuously replenish your hand. So overall, this is just a fantastic card for the deck, letting you search out one of your key pieces and also pull off that nice drawing combo. So absolutely fantastic card, and a definite 4 of. And that is actually the only new card I have added to Bavsargra. So moving on to the next deck, I do have a version 2 for my grade 3 Magnolia deck, which this one did receive a very minor change. All I did was drop 1 copy of Wild Intelligence, and I replaced it with 1 copy of the Regales piece, Gradius Grade All. So you can play it if you have a grade 3 Vanguard with Persona Ride and you did not ride this turn, and it lets you activate Persona Ride. So just an alternate method to get that Persona Ride. Obviously it's very important since grade 3 Magnolia requires you to Persona Ride to get his full effect off and get your full 6 attacks. So having that other way to do that is definitely helpful. And then the only other change we have to this deck is I did swap out the over trigger, so I replaced Bless Favor with Spiritual King of Ignition, Val Naut. So his additional effect lets you choose one of your standing rearguards and it gets a new auto ability until end of turn that says once per turn at the end of the battle this unit attacked, you stand this unit. And then if you did not choose a card, you can draw a card and choose up to one unit card from your hand and call it to rearguard circle. So the reason I replaced Blessed Favor with this card is the same reason I'm running Bound Out in my Magnolia Elder deck, because with Gyunosla you can actually pull off up to 400 million plus attacks in that turn. If you have Gyunosla out on your board and you check into this, you give the effect to him, which will allow you to attack with him, use his skill to pass the 100 million power to one of your other units. Then you can restand him, attack with him again, use his skill a second time, and pass that 100 million to a different one of your units. So that'll be 200 million attacks from Gyunosla, and then 2 other rearguard attacks. That'll also be 100 million. So 400 million plus attacks in one turn is just hilarious to pull off. So I did have to swap out the over trigger mainly for that one play. So those are the only changes to this deck as well. So moving along, we do have version 2 of my Mahar Nirvana deck, which again, it received a minor change. For this deck, I dropped 1 copy of Mahar Nirvana himself, along with 1 copy of Expecta, 1 copy of Amelia, and I removed Horns of Blessing entirely, to add in 1 copy of the Regales piece, Forbidal Surrogate. So its effect lets you search your deck or drop for up to a total of 2 grade 3 or 4 unit cards with different card names and reveal them, and call all of the revealed grade 3 cards to rearguard circle, and put all of the revealed grade 4 cards into hand, and if you search the deck, shuffle the deck. So in this deck, the only grade 3 we're running is Expecta, and you don't want to call him, you want to overdress him. So this card is just there to let you search out a copy of Mahar Nirvana and a copy of Esper Iridia, and get them both into your hand. So that way you can ride into Mahar, and then you can overdress into Esper Iridia. So obviously a very good card, getting you 2 of your key combo pieces. Now, I did drop Mahar Nirvana to 3 copies in order to shove this card in, but it can search out your Mahar Nirvana, so it's not really a big deal. It can make it slightly more difficult to pay his cost, possibly, if you need to do that, more than once. But it's not a huge deal, and being able to search out Esper Iridia is, of course, very nice, since he is the key attacker of this deck. So, very useful skill. So then beyond that, I also added in 3 copies of the set order Chakrabarthi Dance Sai-In. So it has its auto ability that says when this card is put into the order zone or discarded from hand for the cost of your Vanguard's ability, if you have a Vanguard with Nirvana in its card name, you draw a card. So just some free card advantage whenever you play this card, or if you discard it for the grade 3 Nirvana, since obviously grade 4 Nirvana requires you to discard another Nirvana name from your hand. But if you use it on turn 3 for grade 3 Nirvana's cost, or just play it, it can get you a free card into your hand. And then it also has this continuous ability when it's in your order zone that says if you have a Vanguard with Nirvana in its card name, when your rearguard with Virina in its card name would be put into the deck or bind zone by your opponent's card effect, you put all of the Trick Star and the original dress of that unit into your hand, and put that unit and the rest of the original dress into the drop. So this is a nice protection ability against decks that can bottom deck your rearguards or bind your rearguards, so things like Chrono Jet, Shoujo Doji, what have you. And it's very important to protect your Esper Iridia stack, especially if you get a ton of original dress built up in it, since if that entire stack gets bind, you're pretty much fucked at that point. So having this for that protection option against those certain decks is very helpful as well. So that is the only changes to this deck. So moving along, next up we have version 2 of my Kairi deck. So this deck received a very slight change as well. I did just drop the 2 extra copies of grade 3 Kairi in the main deck, as well as dropping grade 4 Kairi down to just 2 copies as well, in order to add in 4 copies of To the Stars of Horizon Rising in the Night Sky Yasmin. What a name. But anyway, she has her activate ability that says if you have a Vanguard with Kairi in its card name, and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can Counterblast 1 to search your deck, soul, or drop for up to 1 grade 4 unit card with Kairi in its card name, write it as stand, return this unit to your deck and shuffle it. So this is the ride up card for Kairi in order for you to potentially ride into grade 4 one turn sooner, if you went second, since it does require your opponent's Vanguard to be grade 3. But it lets you search your deck, soul, or drop, so you can basically grab grade 4 Kairi from anywhere except your damage zone. So if you draw into it early, you can just discard it for your ride deck and then grab it back with this card. Or if you haven't seen it at all, you can just search your deck for it. So it makes it a lot easier to get your grade 4 form more consistently. And of course possibly speeds up the deck as well. So then she also has her continuous ability when she's on Guardian Circle. That says if you have a grade 4 Vanguard with Kairi in its card name, this unit gets shield plus 10,000. So she can also become a 15k shield if you are on your grade 4 form at that point. So the extra copies of this card after you've already used her to ride up can still be useful as just a defensive option in your hand on top of that. So they're not even dead draws after the fact. So very, very useful card overall. So that is all the changes for that deck as well. So moving on, next up we have version 2 of my Flagberg deck, which this one is another one that is barely changed at all. Mostly I just swapped out the heal trigger for a different vanilla heal. So I swapped out Elegy Pixie for 4 copies of Battle Siren Dorsea. So that's just an aesthetic change, just because her artwork is more fitting for a Flagberg deck. And then beyond that, I did also swap out the Over trigger, with Blessed Favor being replaced by Spiritual King of Aquatics, Eidos Faro. So his additional effect lets you choose a card from your drop, put it into hand, and choose one of your units, and it gets critical +1 until end of turn. So I just like this Over trigger more in this deck, since most of the time you're attacking with Flagberg lastly anyway. Parts of the effects of Blessed Favor aren't super helpful, like the front row power gain at that point probably isn't going to be relevant. So having this as the Over trigger in those situations, letting you just get a +1 to your hand and recycle anything you want from your drop, while also potentially giving one of your units an extra crit, is generally more helpful, I think. Plus he's also kind of more thematically fitting as well, since he's, got his water theme. So yeah, that was the only change to this deck. So next up, we have version 2 of my Fortia deck. So for this deck, I did remove 2 copies of Iveta and 1 copy of Ducala, just to add in 3 copies of an Egg Relay Full of Smiles, Juliana. So she has her Friend ability, of course, and then she also has her Auto ability that says when this unit boosts, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Fortia or Mediel in its card name, you choose one of your other friends, and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So a pretty basic power-up ability. If you want, you can just have her be a 13k booster behind one of your rear guards. So that can help your rear guard columns hit better numbers. Alternatively, if you attack with the rear guard column that she's in before you attack with Fortia, you can give that extra 5k to your Vanguard, and that will power up 2 of your attacks that turn by the extra 5k. So a pretty simple ability, but she has a pretty nice, offensive option, being able to hit slightly better numbers than some of the cards we had before. So that is all for that deck. Next up we have version 2 of my Youthberk deck. So for this one, I dropped 1 copy of Schneisel and 1 copy of Reed in order to add in 2 copies of Knight of Plowing Dolbrag. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one is active when he's on front row rearguard circle, and says when your Vanguard is placed on Vanguard circle by the Revolve Dress ability, you choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So again, just a nice power-up ability giving you a free 5k to your Revolve form when you go into it. And then he also has a second auto ability that says when this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, you can Soul Blast 1 card with Revolve form and its card name, and this unit gets power plus 10,000 until end of that battle. So he can also power himself up by 10k if you have a Revolve form in the Soul in order to Soul Blast out. So most of the time, the earliest you'll be able to use this ability is turn 4, since you'll need to, superior ride your OG Youthberk back over top of your Revolve form in order to get into your Soul to blast it out for this cost. but he can be a very nice beat stick on those turns, especially if you got your Persona ride off as well. He can potentially hit 30k on his own even without boost. So he's just a nice card that can power up both your Vanguard and himself to give you that little offensive boost. So then the only other change to this deck is, once again, I swapped out the Over Trigger, replacing a Martinoa with Val Naut, which this deck doesn't have any grade 3 rear guards that you would want to call, so most of the time a Martinoa would only give you 2 extra drive checks anyway, so I decided to just replace it with this card in order to get that little extra offense instead, having you possibly be able to do 200 million plus rear guard attacks. If you would prefer to use Ito's FuRyu, you could go that route as well, but I decided to go with Val Naut. So that is all for our Youth Burk deck. So next up we have version 2 of Baphomedes. So for this deck, I removed 1 copy of Miroslava, 1 copy of Time Jarrett, and 1 copy of Jebina in order to add in 2 copies of Causality Dragon Crucial Dragon. So he has his continuous ability when he's on Rearguard or Guardian Circle. That says if your opponent's drive check or damage check revealed a trigger unit this turn, this unit gets power plus 10,000, shield plus 10,000. So helping make up for the power gain that your opponent could get from any of their trigger checks by either strengthening him himself on the board or becoming a 10k shield in your hand, which if you have Baphomedes' skill online, he would actually be a 15k shield at that point. So then he also has his auto ability that says once per turn, when this unit attacks a Vanguard while not boosted, you can put another rear guard in the same column as this unit into your soul, and perform all of the following. So you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. And then you can also remove an over trigger from your drop, and your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from hand to Guardian Circle until end of that battle. So this ability does work pretty well with this deck, since it can shove another one of your rear guards in the same column as it into soul. So if you haven't been able to give your grade 3's boost yet, you can just throw another grade 3 behind him and shove it into soul when you attack with him, in order to get that extra grade 3 in your soul to contribute towards meeting the conditions of Baphomedes' skill, and also power up Crucial Dragon by an extra 5k, and potentially give him a guard restrict as well if you happen to have your over trigger in the drop zone. So it can just be a pretty good ability to help get, more pieces into your soul. Now it is a -1 to you, but it lets you retire one of your opponent's rear guards as well, so it minuses both of you evenly, so it's not too bad in that regard, and he can be a pretty decent attacker as well. So yeah, I threw him in as a 2 of. Again, this deck is still trying to coast on generics, so as always, we don't have a ton of great options for it, but I thought this card did marginally help, at least. So then beyond that, I did also throw in 1 copy of the Regales piece, Forbid All Surrogate. Since most of the cards in this deck are grade 3s, this card will allow you to search out any 2 differently named grade 3s that you want and get them onto your board. So that is just a free +1, basically, in helping you build out your field. We don't have any grade 4 units in the deck, obviously, so it doesn't help in that regard. But being able to build up your field is very nice, and being able to toolbox pretty much any units that you want out of your deck is very, very helpful. So that is all for that deck. Next up, we have version 2 of my Hazoret deck, which this is one that actually got a pretty significant change. I probably could have went ahead and done a full deck profile for this one, but, like I said, I'm behind enough already. So for this deck, I did take out 2 copies of Sylphia, 1 copy of Faustina, 1 copy of Minmi, and I removed the 1 and only copy of Calfee that I was running as well, in order to add in 3 copies of Emotive Emotion Halfa. So she has the Powerful ability, which is a continuous skill that says during your turn, if your soul has no cards, this unit gets power plus 10,000. And then she also has her auto ability that says when this unit is chosen by the ability of your Vanguard with Herminia or Hazoret in its card name, you can counterblast 1 and draw a card. So this card is one of the dual support cards that they introduced in the Festival Booster, so it's support for both Herminia and Hazoret, So obviously we're using it in the Hazoret deck. So in this deck, if you have her out on your board and you choose her for Hazoret's ability when you are giving all your units plus 2k, you can just go ahead and counterblast one and draw. So pretty nice draw engine for this deck. This deck draws a ton anyway, but you know, it doesn't use a ton of counterblasts. So being able to turn that resource into more card advantage is still helpful. Now, as for her powerful ability, that is geared more towards Herminia, which I didn't build Herminia, but her whole thing is emptying out your soul. So that's more towards that deck, but this deck Soul Blast like crazy anyway. So there are some instances where you still would empty out your entire soul and be able to get that power gain as well. So she does have the 9k base, so she is, you know, below average power like most of Hazoret's support. But that does mean you can search her out off of Clan Felier as well. Plus she'll be gaining 2k from Hazoret's ability and possibly 10k from her own. So she still should be hitting some pretty good numbers. So yeah, overall just a pretty useful card in this deck. So then I also added in 2 copies of Aren't I Great to Be Attending Livora. So she has 2 continuous abilities. That says if you have a Vanguard with Hazoret or Mediel in its card name, and this unit was placed this turn, you get a ability that says all of your trigger units on rearguard circle and in your deck are regarded as normal units instead. So this ability for this deck, obviously another dual support card for Hazoret and Mediel, but in Hazoret, it changes all of your rearguards that are trigger units into normal units. So Hazoret's ability will only let you target normal units on your board. So if you don't have enough normal units in your hand to fill out your field, you can call this card, and the turn you call it, all your trigger units will be treated as normal units. So you can just fill out your board with triggers and still be able to get the full effect of Hazoret's ability. And this can also let you potentially send some of those trigger units back into your deck, since they will gain the skill from Hazoret that will let you bottom deck them after you attack with them and draw. So this is more of a fallback ability if you don't have the necessary cards in order to build a proper board, and you got a handful of triggers instead. You can use this to still make some kind of a board out of it, and potentially cycle some triggers back into your deck. So not a vital ability, but it can be useful in those, you know, sort of edge cases when you can't build the field that you would like to build. And then she also has her second continuous ability that says during your turn, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Hazoret or Mediel in its card name, all of your other rearguards in the same column as this unit get power plus 5,000. So once again, she has the below average power of just being 6k, but she'll be bumped up to 8k by Hazoret's skill, and then she can get 5k to all of the other rearguards in the same column as her. So she can power up the unit that's initially in front of her, and then if you bottom deck it to empty out that circle, and then you use Shaylin's ability to put your back row center rearguard into the front row, you can put it in front of this card, and even if she already boosted your first attack, she can still give at least 5k to that extra rearguard attack you get that turn. So she can be a helpful offensive card as well. So I did just pop her in as a 2 of. So that is all for that deck. Next up we have version 2 of my Lilfa deck. So for this one I removed 1 copy of Prufla, 1 copy of Melty, and 1 copy of Elvi in order to add in 1 copy of the Regales piece for Bidal Surrogate. So once again, there's no grade 4s in the deck, but there is a ton of grade 3s. So this ability will let you search out any 2 of your differently named grade 3s and get them onto your board. So again, free +1, and being able to toolbox any of your key combo pieces is very, very nice. And then I also added in 2 copies of What Color Is Your Wish Valsha Blonde. So she has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this card is discarded from hand during your ride phase, you can Soul Blast one and put this card on the bottom of the deck and draw a card. So helpful skill early game. If you're discarding her to ride from your ride deck, you can Soul Blast and send her to the bottom to draw and replace that discard. So helping you maintain your card advantage early. And then later game, she has her second auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you Persona Road this turn, you can counterblast one to choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets a new continuous ability until end of turn that says all of your front row units get power plus 5,000. So it can be a nice power-up ability too on a Persona Ride turn. Now, it is a counterblast cost, and a lot of the times this deck has other things it would want to be spending counterblast on. But if you do have the resources to spare, being able to power up all of your attacks that turn can be helpful as well. So I did pop this in as a 2 of. It's just a useful card all around, and it is a grade 2, so it flows with the deck very nicely. So that is all for this deck. Moving on, we have version 2 of my Mediel deck as well. So this deck has a very minor change. I did just replace 2 copies of Jute with 2 copies of Livora. So again, dual support for Mediel. So in a Mediel deck, her first skill lets you change all of your units on your top of your deck into normal units. So if you call this during that turn, whenever you use Mediel's skill to reveal the top card of your deck, it basically doesn't matter what you reveal at that point, because it would just go straight to your hand, and then you'll get to revive your unit from the drop and give it the extra crit. So gaining that crit is very important on your rear guard, especially if you're reviving Elise. In order for her to restand herself, you want both those attacks to be 2 crits. So removing the RNG factor for that one turn by just calling this card, instead of having to use your other effects to try to, manipulate the top cards and set up something, it does make the deck a lot more consistent. So having that option is very nice. And of course she still also has the power-up skill just to give whoever's in front of her that extra 5k. So again, if you do put her behind Elise, that will power up both of her attacks as well. So a useful card in the Mediel deck as well. So next up we have version 2 of my Petrolka Highlander deck. So again, a very minor change for this deck. All I did for this one is I removed the 1 copy of Paylene that I had, and I replaced it with 1 copy of Valshablon, since she's just generally more useful. This deck has an excess of soul, so soul blasting early to get that extra draw is very nice. And again, her second skill isn't used as much, since most of the time you want to save those counterblasts for Petrolka's ability or possibly someone else. So she's mostly there for the first ability, but generally she's just more useful than Paylene was. So we did put her in as a 1 of. And then beyond that, we did replace Everlasting Sapphire with the 1 copy of Crossing Illumirays. So it has the continuous ability that says during this fight, this card is also regarded as True-Hearted Ruby and Everlasting Sapphire, which is pretty much irrelevant in this deck. And then you can play this card if you have a Vanguard with Willista in its card name. And its effect lets you put this card into your soul, draw a card, choose one of your Vanguards, and until end of turn, it gets power plus 5,000. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets a new auto ability that is irrelevant in this deck because you can't use it anyway. And then you can't play orders for the rest of this turn, which is also irrelevant. So I just replaced Sapphire with this card because it does what Sapphire does plus more, and it lets you draw, and then you can draw off of the grade 2 Willista's skill, since we are still running the Willista ride line in this deck. So just a much better alternative than the 1 gem that we were using before. So that is the only changes for the Petrolka deck. So next up, we also have version 2 of my Chronojet deck. So this is another one that had a very minor change. All I did for this deck was I took out 1 copy of Chronojet himself, as well as 1 copy of Amazement Magician, in order to add in 2 copies of Brilliant Gunfire Colossus. So he has 2 auto abilities that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle by your Vanguard's ability, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So the only Vanguard ability that can let you Superior Call in this deck is Fate Rider's ability. So on the turn you stride into Fate Rider, if you want to bottom deck a grade 1 card and Superior Call this card from your deck, you can just counterblast 1 and draw, and also power him up. So it can be another draw engine for this deck, so a useful play on that specific turn. And then he also has his auto ability that says when this unit's attack hits a Vanguard, if you have a grade 4 or greater Vanguard, you countercharge 1. So it can also be a countercharge engine as well, which he does have to hit, but between his own ability possibly powering him up and of course your crest ability bumping up his power for all of your face-up G units, he should be hitting some pretty good numbers. So having that nice pressure ability to potentially get your resources back can be helpful as well. And if he hits just once, he'll refund himself, so it'll basically be a free +1 at that point. So, a bit more of a niche card. You don't really have to play this at all if you don't want to, but I thought he was kind of cool and a nice option to superior call off a Fate Rider if you have a board full of grade 1s or whatever, and you want to call out this from your deck. I did think he was just a neat option. So that is all for that deck. So next up we have version 2 of my Minerva deck. So for this deck I have removed 1 copy of Dio Ruing, 1 copy of Cider, and 2 copies of Wisdom of the Beginning that cleared the world, in order to add in 4 copies of Magic of Colored Flame, Rarelim. So she has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle other than during the battle phase, if you have a Vanguard with only Genesis for its clan, you can Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 to draw a card, choose a card from your hand and reveal it, and call it to rearguard circle if it is a unit card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, and discard it if it is not. So this ability is just a Counterblast 1 and a Soul Blast 1 to draw 1 and call 1, so it is a +1 to your hand. And, you know, being a Counterblast and a Soul Blast can be a little steep, but, you know, this deck soul charges like crazy, and being able to get that extra card into your hand can be very, very important. So then she also has her second auto ability that says at the end of the battle this unit boosted if you have a Vanguard with only Genesis for its clan. You can put 2 rear guards in the same column as this unit into your soul to choose a card from your drop with only Genesis for its clan and put it into hand. So this is a very nice ability as well. Now technically this is a -1 since she has to suck both herself and whoever is in front of her into your soul in order to get 1 card back out of your drop. However, that can still be very useful in this deck since it can empty out your front row rearguard circles in order for you to call Chamomile, which if you have Chamomile already on your board that you superior called the turn before, this will be a way to get Chamomile directly from your board back into your soul to set up to use her ability again, while also getting you a Genesis card from your drop back into your hand to potentially pay the discard cost for Minerva's skill as well. So this is the more important ability of the 2, since it allows you to get your combo pieces where you need them to be, can get a Genesis into your hand, can empty out your front row, and can possibly get those Chamomiles or whoever that you need into your soul. So just all around a good card for this deck. So then beyond that, the only other change for this deck was, once again, I did replace the Overtrigger, so I replaced a Martinoa with Eidos Faro, which, again, by the time you attack with your Vanguard, you're probably only going to have grade 2s in your front row, so a Martinoa could only get you 2 extra drive checks at the most. So this ability, again, lets you grab anything you want from your drop and give one of your units an extra crit. So you get that extra crit pressure, and you can recycle anything from your drop. So again, it's another way to get a Genesis card into your hand. You can cycle a Perfect Guard back, whatever you want to grab. So overall, I did think this ability was just more useful in this deck. So that is all for my Minerva deck. So moving on, I do have version 2 of my Maelstrom deck as well, which this one is probably the least changed of any of them. The only difference with this deck was just an aesthetic change, because once again I swapped out Elegy Pixie for 4 copies of Dorsea. So once again, that's just replacing a vanilla heal with a vanilla heal. So doesn't affect how the deck plays any, it's just an aesthetic change since we have the Aqua Force art that is much more fitting. So next up, we also have version 2 of my Archite deck. So for this one, I removed all 3 copies of Cyclogade and replaced him with 3 copies of Emanating Monster Raselic. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this card is discarded from deck or hand during your turn, if your order zone has 2 or more research cards, you can Counterblast 1 and call this card to an open rearguard circle. And then he also has a second auto ability that says when this unit attacks or boosts, you may have this unit get power plus 5,000 until the end of that battle. and if you do, at the end of that battle, you retire this unit. So on the surface, this card doesn't seem all that special. He can turn himself into a 13k attacker or booster, but it comes at the cost of you having to retire him at the end of that battle. So that is a -1 just for a little power gain, which isn't the best thing in the world. However, what's good about this card is his first ability. Since if you discard him from your deck or your hand, you can counterblast one and superior call him to an open rearguard circle. So that means if you discard him directly from your deck off of your Research Orders ability, you can go ahead and counterblast and revive him, so he would be just a +1 to your board at that point. Or if you discard him from your hand for like your ride deck or whatever, again, you can just counterblast and revive him. So that can be nice early game just to give you that early card advantage, but that is not the primary use of this skill because it requires a little bit of luck, but if you can pull things off right, this card can actually allow you to get 5 attacks per turn with this deck. Now, in order to do that, you need to have a copy of this card either in your order zone or already in your hand, and you have to luck into finding a copy of Savoid in the top 7 when you use Arkite's ability. But if you happen to find Savoid and you superior call him during your battle phase, instead of superior calling him to the empty circle that you emptied out with Arkite's ability, instead what you want to do is attack with both your rearguard columns before your Vanguard. Attack with Arkite, send one of your front row monsters into the order zone with her skill, and then if you find Savoid in the top 7, you actually superior call Savoid over top of your rested front row rearguard, and that will leave you an empty circle in your front row, and you can use Savoid's on-call skill in order to add any monster you want from your order zone into your hand. So if you already have this card in your hand, you can just add whatever you want, but if you don't have this card in your hand and you have them in your order zone instead, you add this card into your hand, and then you immediately discard this card, since Savoid requires you to discard after you put the card into your hand. So you discard Raselic, and that will activate his ability, which will let you counterblast and superior call him to the open rearguard circle in your front row. So if you can pull off that combo, that will give you 5 full attacks that turn, and of course you can possibly power up both Raselic and Savoid if you have other copies of them in your order zone with Arkite's ability. You could just bottom deck those copies in order to strengthen those rearguards. And of course Raselic can strengthen himself, which will require you to retire him at the end of that turn. But if you do that, that will get Raselic back into your drop zone, and you can rest your Research Order to put him back into your order zone to potentially loop this combo again next turn. So that is the only way to get the full 5 attacks with this deck, which obviously it is RNG dependent since it requires you lucking into a Savoid to superior call off of Arkite's ability, and of course having your other combo pieces set up as well. But if you can pull all that off, having the 1 extra attack is obviously very nice. So I did think this card was worth running just to potentially boost your offense in those situations. So then beyond that, the only other change to this deck is I did slightly change the trigger lineup. I did drop the 3 front triggers that I was running in this deck and replace them with 3 copies of Patrol Robo Decker Cop. So it's the crit with the skill that you can put into your soul to give someone 2k after it boosts. So you don't really use that ability much. I just preferred to run crits in this deck now instead of fronts, since you gotta kind of change up your attack order to accommodate that 5 attack combo, and I just thought crits ended up working better with the deck now. So that is all the changes for this deck, so moving right along, we do have version 2 of my Shoujo Doji deck. So this is another one that I probably could have done a full deck profile on, but again, in order to save time, I'm not going to. So for this deck, I removed 1 copy of Koma-un, all 3 copies of Forktail that I was running before, so she's gone entirely, as well as 2 copies of Jakumetsu Arcs and 1 copy of Sakuyo Dachi, in order to add in 4 copies of Stealth Fiend Izasao. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you have a Vanguard with Shoujo Doji in its card name, you can counterblast 1 to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and choose up to 1 normal unit with Stealth in its card name from among them, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle the deck. So this is just a fantastic ability. It's a counterblast one for a +1 and lets you grab any stealth normal units you want from the top 5. So of course there is that RNG factor there, and technically it could whiff, but it's not going to much since every normal unit in the deck is a stealth unit. So unless you just find like 5 triggers or something, you should be able to get something out of this. So it can help you dig for your important combo pieces, and we have replaced the Perfect Guard in this deck with the Trial Deck Perfect Guard that has stealth in its name as well. So it can potentially let you grab a Sentinel from the top 5 if you find one. So absolutely fantastic ability. And then he also has a second auto skill that says when this unit is put from rearguard circle into soul during your turn, you choose one of your opponent's face-up cards in the bind zone, put it on the bottom of the deck, and choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So after you call him and use his first ability, then you can attack with him and then just shove him into the soul for Shoujo Doji's cost. And that will trigger his second ability, which will allow you to bottom deck one of the cards that you bound from their rearguard circles off of Shoujo Doji's skill. So that will turn that into a -1 for your opponent. And you can also power up your Vanguard by an extra 5k. So it helps strengthen your Vanguard attack as well. So just all around a fantastic card for this deck, and a definite 4 of. So beyond that, I also added in 3 copies of Stealth Rogue of Path of Chains, Kage Chika. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you can choose a card with stealth and its card name from your drop, and you may put it into the soul. So just a free soul charge from drop, so it can get anything you want in there that has stealth in its name. So if you have anything that you would rather have into your bind zone that you like draw into early, you can just go ahead and discard it for your ride deck, and then call this card and shove it into soul, and then you can bind it from your soul for Shoujo Doji's cost to potentially superior call it back later. So just a nice resource building ability, and also possibly helping you, get your combo pieces where you want them. So then he has a second auto ability that says when your other unit is placed on rearguard circle from the bind zone, if you have a Vanguard with Shoujo Doji in its card name, you can put this unit into your soul and draw a card. So just a cycling ability. Again, he puts himself into soul and lets you draw to replace him when you superior call something from the bind zone. So most of the time that's going to be during the battle phase when you superior call off of Shoujo Doji's ability, but it can possibly be during the main phase as well with some of our other card skills. But either way, it does get you that extra resource without costing you any card advantage, so especially useful against control decks if you're going to lose him off your board next turn anyway. You can just turn him into that resource and, get an extra card into your hand. So, useful ability as well. So then beyond that, I did replace 3 copies of Twin Buckler Dragon with the 3 copies of Escort Stealth Dragon Hayashi Kaze. So this is the perfect guard from the trial deck, so it can't be cost free. If you only have, 1 card left in your hand, you will have to discard every time with this card. So a little worse in that regard, but it does have stealth in its name, so that means you can potentially add it to your hand off of Izusao's ability. So that more than makes up for the discard, which most of the time you would have to do anyway. So having a searchable perfect guard is always a nice thing. So then beyond that, we did just have a little aesthetic change since I did swap out the 3 copies of Sogo with 3 copies of Stealth Dragon Mado Wazu, as well as swapping out the 4 copies of Rayoni with 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Shikin Tan. So that's just swapping a vanilla crit and a vanilla heal for a new vanilla crit and vanilla heal. But again, they fit more aesthetically with the deck, and they do have stealth in their names, but all the abilities require stealth normal units, so it doesn't really matter much. But yeah, they're aesthetically more fitting, so I went with them. So that is all the changes for that deck, and lastly, the last update we have is version 2 of my Megalonozuchi deck. Now, for this deck, I probably should have upgraded it more, but I didn't, really. The only changes for this deck are actually the same aesthetic changes that Shoujo Doji got. I replaced the 3 Conduct Spark Dragon with 3 Mado Wazu, and again, I replaced Rayoni with the 4 copies of Shinkin Tan. So once again, that is just an aesthetic change. It doesn't affect how the deck plays in any way. I probably could have found a way to squeeze Izasao and or Kagechika into this deck, and they actually probably could have done pretty well. But I didn't bother with it, and frankly I don't feel like it, because I'm probably going to have to rebuild this deck in Dear Days 2 anyway. So yeah, that's all the changes I made to this deck. If you want to squeeze in, especially Izasao, you could probably do that and replace like Tensha Stead or whatever. But that is up to you. So anyway, that is the last version 2 upgrade that I have to go over in this video. I think I have covered all my upgrades to all my other decks. So that means I am finally done making videos for Dear Days 1. So I've made a ton of videos for this game, I made a ton of decks. I do absolutely love this game. I've been waiting a long time for a Cardfight Vanguard video game to be released in English, and I definitely took advantage of it. So now that I am finally finished with this game, I will be moving on to Dear Days 2, and I don't know exactly when, but at some point I will be back with a absolute shitload of videos for that game as well, since I do plan on doing a ton of deck profiles for both standard and vintage format in that game. So I don't know exactly when I'm going to be starting with those. I'm obviously going to just start the game and enjoy playing through the story mode and building and testing my decks before I start in recording videos for them. So might be a little while. In the meantime, I do plan on, doing some other non-Vanguard related videos. So I'll still have plenty of things going up on the channel. But as soon as I am able to, I will be starting in on Dear Days 2 as well. So anyway, until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.